He threw a leg across that iron horse and pulled the throttle down. A million things rushing through his mind like that rumbling sound. Living life in his own eyes, direction isn't clear. So searching all these years.
Welcome to Answers from Mars Hill. This is Pastor Ski of the Rushing Wind Biker Church in the Holbrook, New York, and New York State Elder for Bikers for Christ Motorcycle Ministry. Welcome to today's show. Last week we kind of changed the format a little bit, and we're taking a couple of questions a week, and I'm trying to address them as if somebody came up to me and asked a question. I think it's been a lot more productive, maybe more interesting, and having my producer kind of ask me the questions and interact a little bit. And this is this kind of is a better way to present this show and to do what I'm hoping to accomplish, answering questions about this faith called Christianity that I've dedicated my life to, not from a religious standpoint, not from condescending, judgmental, but to help people understand the inner workings of why we believe what we believe, why certain things are the way they are within Christianity and the Bible, and actually the purpose of things that are said in the Bible. Because unless you're in this faith, and most people out there aren't even aware of much of what's contained in the Bible, they kind of gain everything from television and the History Channel and all kinds of things that really have no resemblance to actually what the Bible actually says. And so, my hope, as I said when I started the show, was to have a conversation and kind of explain the reality of what true biblical Christianity is, just so you'll understand. And like Paul, when he was in Athens and was on that Areopagus on Mars Hill and spoke to the people who believed in many other spiritualities, many other faiths, just introducing them to a God they didn't know that much about. And so that's really the purpose of my show. And today we have several other questions that have come in that I want to address. What I'm doing now is really not very much prepared, so it's very much like somebody came up to me and asked a question. And so I'm hoping that you'll gain some understanding and maybe understand that we don't hate you, and try not to hate us, because we kind of believe in something we think is important. So this is my producer Bobby in the corner there on the screen, and he's going to be reading off some questions that some viewers have sent in. So Bobby, how you doing today?
I am doing great, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to start off our first question. This is actually a really good question, because this is something that I've pondered, and I've actually heard multiple answers to this. So it would be nice to get your opinion on it.
Okay.
This comes from Christina in Spokane, Washington, and it says, don't Christians and Muslims worship the same God? Aren't Jehovah and Allah just different names for the same God? So, I mean, you have the Jews who worshiped God and the Christians who worship the same God,
Mm-hmm.
and where do the Muslims fall in? Because I've heard different kind of answers to this. What's your take on that?
All right, if you go to the history of each faith and where they all originated, the progression of the movement, because Christianity is really just a fulfillment of the Jewish faith. They are still in the place that they don't believe their Messiah came, and we believe that the Messiah did in fact show up, and that was Jesus. And so, when you take these three faiths, they're all within, I guess, what you would call Abrahamic, Abrahamic, or whatever religions that all stem back to the forefather of really all three of these faiths. And Judaism, as the Bible and the Jewish scriptures have described of God being Abraham being chosen by God to start a community and a nation that would be guided by and live under the principles of how God wanted humanity to really be in community when He created us. And as I've spoken before, trying to redeem some of this darkness that has become the human condition, the human dilemma. And so, Abraham had 2 sons. He was promised by God that he would be given a son, and he would have a nation, and the nation would be so big that it would be more than the sands in the sea and the stars in the sky. And so, as the story goes, Abraham became an old man. And he didn't end up having a child until he was 100 years old. And there was a lot of faith, and he didn't trust God, and he trusted God. And just like we all struggle with faith, even Abraham, who is known as the father of our faith, struggled at times. And so some semblance of time before, I believe it's 13 years, but I could be incorrect off a little bit on that. Before the promise was fulfilled with Sarah, his wife, his wife kind of said, God gave us a promise, this ain't working out. And she had this handmaiden named Hagar. And so he said, why don't we kind of give God a little help here, and you can have this child through Hagar. And so Abraham had a son named Ishmael, who was through the handmaiden and not through his wife, which is whom God had promised the promise of a nation through. And so you had this son Hagar, this son Ishmael, and then lo and behold, 13, 14 years later, God fulfills the promise, and Abraham's 100, Sarah's 90, and kind of old, but God kind of does things out of our box sometimes. And so they have Isaac. And so now you have these 2 sons, Ishmael and Isaac. And so from the Christian and the Jewish perspective, based on the promise of God, Ishmael was not the promised son that God had promised, but Isaac was, because it was fulfilled through the marriage of Sarah and Abraham. And so then the Bible and the Jewish faith comes through the lineage of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob's 12 sons, and you have the nation of Israel, and then the story develops all the way through the growing of the nation and moving back to the promised land and the slavery and the story of all this. And then through prophecy in the Old Testament, Jesus is the Messiah, as we view it in Christianity, and with several, more than several, a lot of prophetic things in the Old Testament kind of leaning towards that end, that Jesus was the Messiah. Lo and behold, Christianity comes along, and so the Jewish faith and the Christian faith have the same God, Yahweh, Elohim. He's spoken of with different names in the Old Testament for different purposes, and his character and what he was about in that moment. And so Yahweh, Elohim, and the God that we believe that had Jesus as son, same God. All right. Now you have the earth is being populated, and these other people that show up in the stories and the families that aren't in the lineage are obviously out there creating people groups, communities, nations out there. And so Ishmael is basically the father of all the Arab nations, all the Arabs in that region. And so somewhere about between 320 AD, after Jesus was born, a man named Muhammad was given a vision, and then started this new faith called Islam. And if you read stories in the Quran and stories in the Old Testament, there are a lot of similarities, but the Hebrew scriptures were written a long time before. And so some of the stuff in the Quran are kind of different takes on the stories that we believe are in the sacred books of the Bible. And so this vision that is given to Muhammad, we don't believe came from God, came from somewhere else. And so, Allah is really another name for God. And when you really research into Muhammad's father, there were several gods that were prevalent in the Arab area at that time. So I believe somewhere around 400. But there was a premier god that they viewed as kind of a supreme, or the creator of more, or the creator of everything, and those other gods were kind of subservient, called Allah. And so, so that's the God that is the God of Islam. And kind of over the centuries, for inclusion, this premise of Allah and Yahweh, Jehovah, Elohim, the same God, is not true. Allah came along a lot of years later from a God that had nothing to do with the God of Judaism and Christianity. And so there's, even though it's an Abrahamic religion, because Ishmael was a son of Abraham, Isaac was a son of Abraham, it wasn't a fulfillment of the promise for the nation of God from a Christian and Jewish standpoint. And so, are they the same God? Absolutely not. And you just look at the character and just the way Allah speaks, Allah's relationship with the Muslims, Elohim and Yahweh's relationship with the Jews and the Christian. They're not even really that compatible in the possibility of being the same God. And so, after our first break, maybe I'll continue a little bit more on that, because I think that's an important point, because there is this idea out there that it's all one God. So when we come back, I want to continue this conversation about Allah versus the God of the Bible.
Hey everybody, this is Motorcycle Mike, the personal injury lawyer. I've been riding motorcycles my entire adult life. During the course of my 30-year career as a lawyer, I've also represented countless injured motorcyclists. If you're one of them, I can be of assistance to you. Go to my website, please, motorcyclemikeesq.com. I'll always be there for you. I'm on your side when you ride.
Welcome to Wolfman's Bike Alert. I'm Kenny the Wolfman Max, and right now I'm going to bring you a brand new jacket in for the ladies. An embroidered jacket that just hasn't been out yet. This is the first time. The Flying Angel and the ever popular Brando jacket. It's been around for 100 years and will be around for 100 more. I've got hundreds and hundreds in stock. Don't forget our large selection of sunglasses. I've got all types of jewelry, ladies biker jewelry, silver rings, hundreds of men's rings. We've got it all. Everything is here, right here. Wolfman's Bike Alert, 335 Smithtown Boulevard in Ronkonkoma. My phone number is 631-578-7877. 631-578-7877. Friday night again.
Welcome back to Answers from Mars Hill. This is Pastor Ski again, and if you're just tuning in, we're discussing the question about does the the God that the Christians and the Jews worship as God, the same as Allah, the God that the Muslims and Islam promotes as their God. And so,
Yeah, so I'm a little confused. So maybe I can kind of just ask you, because like we said in the Bible, Sarah was impatient, so she told Abraham to have sex with Hagar, the handmaid, and they had an illegitimate child, which wasn't supposed to be the chosen one, Ishmael. But didn't at one point God bless Ishmael with nations also? So if God did bless Ishmael with the nations, wouldn't that be the same God? Or at one point, did it change? Am I correct in God promising Ishmael, making a promise?
No, God promised. There was a part of the story where Hagar is really thrown out of town with her son, and God is a merciful God. God is a compassionate God. God is a loving God. His people and the ones that are called for His purpose are one thing, but that doesn't mean God is not compassionate in general. And so, part of the story is Hagar is out kind of in the wilderness, and she's starving, and she doesn't have enough food for her son, and she kind of even leaves him and kind of goes away because she doesn't want to see her son die. And then God speaks to Hagar, and gives her a promise too, that her son Ishmael would be the father of a nation and many people, and bless them. But that blessing is really a blessing of a nation and a people that would grow and would be prosperous. It had nothing to do with the promise that God made Abraham of bringing the kingdom down to people that were chosen to show the world what the kingdom of God was planning on being. And so it's not like, she was just cast aside because she didn't do anything. She was just being an obedient servant. Mm-hmm. And now you have a child who was really the fruit of something that God never intended. And all through history, you'll see that God kind of redeems things that were done originally with wrong intentions, but things can be redeemed. And we're looking at the prosperity, and we're looking at many nations in that area of the world right now, the Arabs, and they've been blessed as far as having a community, having nations, but as far as the promise that was given to Abraham, that was fulfilled in the way that God said it would be fulfilled. And so Ishmael was the fruit of a broken promise and the fruit of a broken covenant, because Abraham stepped out of the covenant that God had made with him and the promise to have sex with Sarah's handmaiden, and try to be God for God, mm-hmm. and fulfill something with what they wanted to do, because it didn't seem like God was working fast enough. And I think a lot of us have had that problem, that we end up doing something because we get impatient with God. Mm-hmm. But Ishmael was not going to pay. It was going to be, he wasn't going to be put to death, or it was going to be, discarded totally. And so, because it was no effect of their own, God blessed them, said you'd be a nation, but never said they would be subservient. Well, they would never be superior or even equal to the promise and the blessing of the nation of Israel.
So, so at what point? Because, like you said, God is merciful, and He realized that Ishmael was innocent in this, and so He blessed Hagar and Ishmael. At what point did it go from that God, our God, making that promise to all of us? At what point did that God become a different God?
No, he didn't become a different God. just like today, there's a lot of different spiritualities, a lot of idols, a lot of gods, a lot of, kind of spiritual thought and stuff. Back then was even more. There was, like I said, in the Arab area at that time, there's estimates as many as 400 different gods and idols, the god of this, and, we kind of, if we look at like Greek gods, they had specific purposes and what they were in control of, and so you had all these gods and idols throughout that area of Arabia, and so there was one god in particular that was called Allah. And as a matter of fact, Muhammad's father, his name was Abdullah, which means slave of Allah, and that was Muhammad's father. And so when you kind of dig and you look inside the history of the people, not just the religion, you get an idea of how this tangent occurred. And so in the movement of God through the scriptures and his people, Ishmael is really not mentioned again. And so we have this other vision, if you will, that Muhammad has. And he is under the impression that he is visited by the angel Gabriel. In the Quran, he's called Jibril, and that this new revelation on God's story was given to him, and it was a separate revelation. Changes in part to the original revelation, which as Jews and Christians we believe is the Word of God. And so now you have this other vision contradicting what we believe is a true Word of God, introducing a God that really came out of the Arabian desert and the Arabian region amongst all these other gods that existed. And so, from a Christian perspective, I guess more so than a Jewish perspective, because I know obviously this perspective a lot more. We have our thoughts on the realities of Christianity versus Islam, and so our perspective is Allah is not God. Allah was a God, as much as there are 400, 500 other gods, and there's things people worship today that are gods. And so when you really look at the history, it diverged at Abraham. Once it got to the next generation is where they both went off. And so the God of the Bible is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we see how he worked in their nation with miraculous things, how he moved them, how even them going into the promised land, taking their land back, was done with a lot of miraculous wars that have been documented. And I think earlier shows we talked about how the fallen walls of Jericho have been found, with no explanation of how they fell, exactly how they did fall. And so the stories of the Bible and the movement of God's people leading up to the birth of their Messiah is all documented historically. Some miracles. Miracles have archaeological proofs. If people really want to dig and see, there are unexplained things that are part of the stories that are in the Bible, which are actually history. And then you have 325 years after Jesus is born, this other thing pops up, which is an antithesis, an exact opposite of what the true faith had been up until that point. And so this other divergent path that Allah is the God, and how Allah is promoted and the type of God he is and his relationship, which really is not a relationship with his people. The character is not even the same God. And that's not to create these heated dialogues, but how Allah is perceived in Islam is totally different to the way Jehovah and Elohim and Yahweh is viewed in the Christian and Jewish religion. And so they're not even alike. And so, no, there's no, it's an inclusivity that this world is trying to promote. Let's all get together and let's all, just play in the same sandbox, and, whatever you believe is good, whatever we believe is good, let's all, sing Kumbaya and have a peaceful life together. And that's all well and good, but if that's the truth, then there is no truth. And so, you have to search through for yourself the historicity and let the facts lay where they are. But no, they're not the same God. And so I don't even think true Muslims believe that they're the same God.
All right, so we only have a minute left. This is a really deep question. So I just want to end this. Did it start out as the same God, and then the Muslims kind of transferred that belief into Allah?
No, the Arab nations and the Muslims were part of, the world was populated outside of God's people. And so there were all kinds of gods. And so this one God and this one movement really took hold because, Islam is a different type of promotion. Christianity is a faith of invitation, and Islam is more a faith of imposition. There's a God that's all powerful and all vengeful, and you better serve him. And that's fine. That's, obviously God is big and powerful, where the God that we serve and the God we believe is real is a God of love, a God of compassion, and even the things that we can maybe look at, not understanding how love and compassion works, you can get a picture of how that all works with a loving God. And so, we're almost ready for our next break. So after this next commercial break, I think we'll move on to another question. But what I want to encourage us to do, at the end of the show, there's an email address. This question, if you have more questions, more input, email me and we'll continue this conversation. So we'll be back from a word from our sponsors.
Hi, my name is Sharon Gillette, and I'm the owner of One Stitch at a Time. I've been doing this since I'm 9 years old, but it became full-time when my husband was diagnosed with cancer several years ago. And I never went back to work because I wanted to take care of him. I feel what makes me stand out is that I care. I take a personal interest in your project. I take the time to find your correct fit and treat you like a friend, not just a customer. So whether it's embroidery, making patches, printing shirts, doing alterations and repairs, or bringing your ideas to life, you can call me at 631-428-1245 or visit my website at www.onestitchatatime.co.
Hello and welcome back to Answers from Mars Hill. We're going to address another question now, but before I do that, for those who've been watching this show, I know there's probably a lot of questions out there, a lot of confusion, and maybe some, maybe some disagreements with what I was talking about in the first half of the show. Email me, answersfrommarshill@gmail.com, and I want to address your questions. If you need me to explain a few things deeper of Allah versus the God of the Bible, I'd love to be able to answer and maybe address some disagreements that you might have. So anyway, back to Bobby in the control booth over there, and let's hit the next question.
Okay, we got a local question right here from Massapequa, and this is from Harold, and his question is, if we are to only have sex for the purpose of procreation, and to do so outside of the scope of procreation is sinful, then why would God create us with an overabundance of nerve endings in our reproductive organs, making sex extremely pleasurable? It sounds like yet another setup.
Actually, those are kind of the questions and the attitudes that I really want coming in, because I want to clear up some things and maybe be able to explain the purpose of things in our life according to the God of the Bible and a Christian perspective. And this question about sex in particular, if anyone told you that it was purely for procreation, they haven't read the Bible, because it wasn't purely for procreation. Obviously, you have a husband and a wife, and they have a relationship. And so, what I want to do is explain relationally why that's a very, very important question, and why this humanity in certain aspects has gone to where it's just corrupted itself and corrupted relationships. You know, when God created us as humans, He created us to have just an incredible life. And when God created us in the beginning, He said it's not good for man to be alone. It's really the only statement in all of creation that God said this is not good. You know, everything else He created, it was good, and then He said it's not good for man to be alone. And we were never created to be isolated from another human being or humanity in general. And so God, in His infinite wisdom, so to speak, created what's called a helpmeet, and that doesn't mean a woman or a wife is subservient. It means that they complete each other. And so, in a growing humanity, in a growing communal kind of atmosphere and societies and cultures, there's something really special about someone who has surrendered themselves to you and you to them. And that's why marriage was really created, why God created that relationship, because we can't go through this life together. And so the physicality of humanity versus the spirituality of God, and you know, as Christians we believe we have a spiritual life in that. And God understood that this flesh would be a challenging medium or media for us to live in, and have life, enjoy life, and have relationships, but also have one particular relationship that would be extraordinary, that would complete us, and that through that loving relationship, the kindness, the serving each other, that's where procreation would come from, through that relationship. And so when God created, as you said, certain parts of our body with intense nerve endings and stimulating, nerves or whatever else, that was really created for an extraordinary relationship with one person, because of the extraordinary nature of how this body that we're in humanity would respond to one person, that we could bond in an extraordinary way with how we could make each other feel physically, on top of how we can make each other feel spiritually with love and compassion and serving and the other spiritual aspects of our life. And so that extraordinary experience was meant as a bond to two people, to bring them so close together. You know, the Bible says two become one. And so, as you said, that experience and that part of our physical interaction was intended to be with one person for an intimate, tight bond with one person that we would go through life with and love and serve, and they would take care of our needs physically, spiritually, whatever else, and vice versa. And then because of the fall of man, and because of the things that were introduced into our world, as far as selfishness, pride, ego, hate, and all these other feelings that have been introduced when man kind of ventured into the dark side of this humanity. Now, what was created to be the most extraordinary gift between two people dedicated to each other for the rest of their life now became something that has been kind of a weapon gone mad, because you have this physical capability, and now you have this mentality of all about me. I'm selfish, and I want to feel this, and I want to feel this. And so you get people using each other. And then, you get attitudes, and now, what was supposed to be a bond between two people, now you're inviting other people into that experience. And so the relational part of what we were always meant to be in just the perfection of humanity has been ripped apart in a lot of ways by the very thing that was put there so that we could bond together. Procreation and being able to increase humanity, bring more of the ultimate of God's creation into this world, obviously was a big part of it. But without the two parts of that union, this is why the family's breaking down. This is why children are having all kinds of problems, because the breakdown of the marriage has been the breakdown of society. And the breakdown of the marriage, in no small way, has been in no small part because of this struggle we have with the sexual part of our being, mixed with just the selfishness and all the things that we inherently have as human beings. And so, another setup. No, you're kind of looking at this from such a worldly perspective that this is just something like another tool for us to have fun in our life. And unfortunately, I think that is the case with a lot of people, where that one aspect of our being, our humanity, our physicality, was a gift to bring two people into a bond so intimate that they would only want to be with each other, and that they would be dedicated to each other spiritually and now physically. And so, looking at sex from really what God created us for, what God created this whole, obviously created us to have this relationship and these feelings, but everything was created for good, and we just have trashed it. And we've made it, sex is a weapon. We use people, there's sex trading, everything has gone crazy because of, like you said, that maybe the most heightened sensory experience we have in this body. And so it's been used as one of the biggest weapons and one of the biggest ways to use people to get what we want out of everything. And so when you look at one day up the road we're going to talk about different things in sexual, what's sin, what's not sin. But I think with that backdrop of understanding what that part of our humanity was given as a gift to us for, I think you could understand the other aspects of why the Bible, God's Word, and why true Christianity talks about sexuality and sex and relationships in a way that the world just doesn't want to do that, because they want to do what they want to do, and they don't even understand why this sexuality was actually given us as a gift in the first place. And so, I hope that addresses that question, because it's a misconception that, that is kind of an animalistic way of looking at sex, like we're just animals procreating. And yes, that's an important part of us having the ability to expand humanity, but that's not the only reason that God created this. I mean, He could have created other ways for us to procreate. We could have done it a lot of different ways. Maybe not even have two people. There are certain kind of organisms that in their cells they can duplicate. And so, understanding God's relational way of looking at us now, we couldn't live through this life alone. I think we can get a deeper understanding of why sex, why it's here, what its purpose is, and when it's viewed in the goodness of what the original intent was, maybe get an understanding of how this humanity has gone way out of whack, because they've taken what God has created for good and just made it a tool to make ourselves happy and feel good. So I hope I answered that question to the extent that you can understand how God views sex and what the purpose of that is in the Christian realm. So I hope that answers your question sufficiently about, the purpose of sex, sexuality, and these feelings that we have from a Christian perspective. And so as we end this segment and move into the last part of our show, we'll address another questions. But first, a couple of words from the sponsors who have been so gracious as to contribute to this program.
Hey everybody, this is Motorcycle Mike, the personal injury lawyer. In addition to representing injured motorcyclists for over 30 years now, during that same time, I've represented countless car crash victims and construction workers injured on construction sites. If you need my assistance, go to my website, motorcyclemikeesq.com. I will always be there for you.
This is Pastor Ski, and I want to tell you about two books that I've written, The Fear of Life and No Sting. The Fear of Life is my journey of faith and how I lived in fear for close to 35 years and how God took me out of it. No Sting is about my battle with cancer and my victory through God over it. And if you're interested in any of these books, go to barnesandnoble.com, amazon.com, and also zulonpress.com. Go to the bookstore. And again, I want to thank you for your support. Welcome back to Answers from Mars Hill. This is Pastor Ski again. And we've had two pretty intense questions today, and I'm really enjoying being able to share, I think, a deeper Christian perspective of some very important questions that have come in. And so one more segment, and I think we'll be able to deal with one more question today. Bobby, what do we got?
Okay, this is an interesting question, and this comes from I don't know if it's Damon or Desmond from Algoma, Mississippi. Okay, and he would like to know, why do Christians share the same statistical rate of divorce as everyone else? And then he quotes, "What God hath made, let no man put asunder. How could Christian marriages fail if they are sanctified by God?" Interesting. So these questions,
yeah, these are the kind of questions I kind of wanted to come in.
But this is a good question, though.
It is a very good question.
It's a very good question.
It's a very good question. And so one question, I came a little bit prepared today, statistics-wise. And the reason being, and I've said many times and will continue to say, it's very easy to call yourself a Christian in today's day and age. And because of that, we don't know who really believes. We don't know who really has faith. And then, what kind of realm or conviction do they have within that faith? I have some statistics from the Barna Group. They're a group that does polls and statistics, and this is a little bit older. It's 2013. I have to get the more modern ones, but these are the ones I've used for certain things in marriage counseling and stuff. In 2013, the divorce rate in the United States was roughly between 40 and 50%. And so, the failure rate, you're looking at roughly half. within that, you have Christians. Their divorce rate was between 35 and 38%. Conservative evangelic believers, which is the evangelic, realm or sphere of Christianity, it went down to 20 to 24%. And then all Christians, non-Christians, all their faiths hover somewhere between 33 and 38%. And so when you look at this this statistic, just purely by people check a box on a form and a survey, it's very easy to see that there really is no impact of this faith of Christianity when it comes to marriage. Even though marriage was initiated by God within His Word in Genesis, not good for man to be alone, and we kind of know how the story goes, at least from a biblical perspective, whether you believe it or not. You kind of understand the story, and so why does it seem like these statistics kind of don't promote an idea that Christianity is a glue that holds marriages together? And to address this question, really, you need to understand what a true Christian is. And do they actually live their life according to what God would have them to live their life as the best human experience, the best way to go through life, the best way to treat your wife, the best way to treat your husband. And so, it all comes down to really is someone taking everything that is in this book, which Jesus said is God's Word, and actually living their life by it. And that's what it means to really walk in this faith. It doesn't mean going to church all the time. It doesn't mean that we separate ourselves from any kind of interaction with the real world. But we walk in this world a little bit different because we have a different spiritual makeup than other people. And then even within that, do we do our due diligence and dedicate ourselves to really trying to be the best husband, the best wife, the best friend, the best family member, the best employee, best employer, and really tap into God on every level. And so when we address this question, there's a group of Christians that obviously are out there that actually are all into this faith. It's not just part of their life; it's their whole life. And so their social circles tend to be people of faith when they go out and whatever they do, and their purpose is to share the love of Christ and to maybe introduce people to what could be a better life. And so when we look at those kind of people, and what I'm going to call them is evangelic. Obviously nowadays people kind of throwing that word around. It's not a bad thing. It just means that we believe we got the best thing since sliced bread, and we'd like to share it. Maybe not in an oppressive way, but at least an introductory way. And so when you take this group that are Bible believing, they believe that this is God's Word. They go to church, so they have a family of people that they socialize and worship with and get together with regularly. That they're actually following Jesus. They have a call in their life that their faith is involved in. And when you take that type of person and check all those boxes off, the divorce rate is somewhere around 5%. And so we see that when people actually live their life according to the way God initiated and put together this relationship of marriage. And the last segment we talk about sexuality and stuff, and yeah, that's part of it also. The ones that are really serving God in their marriage, the divorce rate is minuscule. But then again, you look at, there's millions and millions of Christians around the world going to different churches, and some of them don't even believe some of the things that the Bible clearly says. Some of them just go about their lives and just do whatever the heck they want to do, and they don't think God has a problem with it, and maybe they'll not pay in other areas, but a lot of the ways they're going to pay is they're going to be paid with divorces, with kids with issues, and a lot of other things that comes out of that. And so, when you look at the divorce rate of people that check the box as Christian, understand that the reality is I don't believe a majority of those people are actually followers of this man called Jesus. Jesus says, I know my sheep because they know my voice. And it also says you will know them by their fruit. And the fruit is the things that is our character, love and gentleness and loving kindness and patience and all these things that are just part of what Jesus was. Those type of believers who hold on to each other, hold on to their faith, and yes, live a normal life in the world, the divorce rate is very minuscule. And so, when you think about it, understand what a real Christian is before you want to throw us all in a category and say, see, what you got isn't really making a difference. See the ones that are really, using this as their instruction manual in their life, and you're going to see a big difference. You'll see a huge difference. You'll see the reason why people like myself have actually given myself to this faith. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life before I was really following this faith to the best of my ability. And I tell a lot of people, my wife is my hero because she held on to this when I wasn't exactly the right guy doing the right thing. And because, one person in a marriage held on to this through a lot of years that maybe in the world we might not be together. I'm going to be celebrating my 43rd wedding anniversary with one woman, and it's biggest blessing in my life.
That's beautiful.
Biggest blessing in my life.
43 years, absolutely.
And so, that's the reality of this discussion on divorce.
So we have people who classify themselves as Christians, but technically they're not practicing Christians.
Well, it's when you say not practicing, you're basically saying not Christian.
Well, yeah, but they call themselves Christians. So they.
I could call myself African American. I'm not African American.
They identify as Christians, but they're really not practicing.
No, people want to identify with whatever they want to identify. And it's funny right now because we went through generations where identifying yourself as a Christian had benefits. Now when you identify yourself as a Christian, you're like a marked person. And so it's actually a good thing because it's kind of forcing people to kind of make a decision. Am I a fake Christian? Am I a pseudo-Christian? Or am I going to take, whatever I have to put up with and actually stand in this faith and what God has for us to really walk in as followers of Jesus. And so, just because somebody checks a box off, goes to church, sings a few songs, it's what their heart is, and their heart is exposed in their whole life. Yeah. And then when you take that into consideration, then check the real numbers. Yeah. That's really the truth of this conversation.
Yeah, and it's not easy being Christian today. And I think Alice Cooper, who is a huge rock star, he quoted himself saying that something to the effect that trashing a hotel room is easy, blah blah blah. Yeah. But being a Christian, that's rebellion right there.
Yeah, Alice Cooper is an on-fire Christian. He's got a ministry teaching young inner-city kids how to play music and do things and sharing Jesus with them. It's great because I have one of my Facebook pages. I have Alice Cooper all over it because he's got some pretty unique pro-Christianity sayings while he's dressed up as Alice, and so it's really the glue that holds this relational part of our life together. And so as we wind down the last section, I want to thank you for tuning into Mars Hill. I want to thank our sponsors. And again, if you have questions about these questions, comments about these questions, answers from marshill@gmail.com. We're at the Rushing Wind Biker Church, 10 Peachtree Court in Holbrook, New York. Come check us out, 5:30 Sundays, 6:30 on Wednesdays, and we like to talk about the Bible on Fridays at 7:30. So God bless you all, and I'll see you next week.